Your Legislators is made possible by Minnesota Corn. From developing best practices that help farmers better protect our natural resources to the latest innovations in value-added products, Minnesota corn farmers are proud to invest in third-party research leading to a more sustainable future for our local communities. Minnesota Farmers Union, standing for agriculture, working for farmers. On the web at mfu.org.
Good evening, and welcome to this week's version of Your Legislators. My name is Barry Anderson. I'll be your host this week and all the weeks that follow until the legislature goes home. Now, if you've tuned into our program in the course of the last 2 or 3 weeks, you've probably seen a repeat or a note that will be coming to you in the following weeks. It's been an interesting year at the Minnesota Legislature, and I think our legislators this evening will discuss that topic a little bit. But one of the complications for our program is that we have on some evenings conflicted with floor sessions, and obviously the job to which the legislators are elected takes priority over appearing on our program. We are so grateful that our legislators this evening and the preceding weeks and the weeks ahead have been willing to make time for us to give our viewers an opportunity to ask questions about what's going on at the Minnesota State Capitol. We recognize they can't always be with us, and sometimes we have to scramble a little bit from a programming standpoint. But fortunately, we have a great program for you this evening, and we hope that will be the same with all the weeks that follow until the legislature goes home. I begin this evening, as I do most weeks, by introducing our distinguished panel of guests who will help us unravel the mysteries of St. Paul. And I begin with a newcomer to our program, Senator Liz Boldon from Rochester. Senator Boldon, we're delighted that you're with us. Tell our viewers a little bit about your background, committees you serve on, your time in Rochester. And as I understand it, we were talking before the program began, you did a little tour in the House before coming over to the Senate. Maybe talk about that as well. The floor is yours. Introduce yourself to our viewers.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here with you all tonight and be able to have this conversation. So I'm Liz Boldon. I represent District 25, which is most of Rochester and some areas north, Orinoco and some townships north. This is my first term serving in the Senate. You are correct. I served one term in the House prior to this. The committees that I serve on currently include Health and Human Services, Elections, Education Policy, and I serve as the vice chair of the Housing and Homelessness Prevention Committee. As Senator Lucero and I serve on that committee together. My life and work outside of the legislature is that I'm a registered nurse. I've been a nurse for over 20 years. I worked in a number of areas over that time, but currently work in the float staff, which means essentially in the hospital I go wherever I'm needed. I'm also a mom of 3 kids, and that's sort of myself in a nutshell. I look forward to the conversation, and again, just really grateful to be here with you all.
Yeah, we're delighted to have you, and thank you for that great introduction. Senator Eric Lucero from St. Michael, tell our viewers a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you, and it's an honor to be with you again. I believe this is my 3rd time, and it's always an honor and a privilege. So I am presently also first term in the Senate. I was elected in the same time Representative Heintzeman was. I was same class, 8 years in the House prior to moving over to the Senate. So I'm in my 9th term as a legislator. The committees that I serve on in the Senate, the Housing Committee, the Energy Committee, and the Education Finance Committee. The career that I have outside the legislature is cybersecurity. I do cybersecurity for a living. I've been in that industry for over 20 years, and that is what makes my profession and the skill set that I bring to the legislature very important these days. As we've all known, that cybersecurity, there isn't a headline that goes by without, a day goes by without a headline that impacts us in this area. But also, I am a licensed real estate agent, a licensed general contractor, and a small business owner between my wife and I. So we have a lot going on. And again, it's a pleasure to join you again on the program.
Well, maybe if we have an opportunity, we can talk about the city of Minneapolis and its cybersecurity issues. They are, I should say, the Minneapolis School District. had some cybersecurity issues. It seems to strike just about everybody at one time or another. Let's go to you, Representative Heintzeman. You've been with us before. Tell our viewers a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, glad to be back, Barry. Thank you for inviting me. I represent the Brainerd Lakes area. I'm in my 5th term in the Minnesota House, so 9 years that I have served. And I've enjoyed my time here representing the district. It's now 6B, and the committees that I'm currently serving on are the Environment Natural Resources Committee, which I've been in that subject area for a long time. I'm the GOP lead there. I'm also on Ways and Means and the Legacy Committee. So those are the subject areas that I tackle primarily in the Environment Natural Resources area. And then, the Legacy Committee, that's, in the same vein and enjoying that quite a lot. There's been over the years a lot of interesting things happening, and so I'm glad to be, having served and had the opportunity to represent my district. In my regular life, I'm working in the trades. I'm a builder in the Lakes area. I have a number of properties that my wife Carrie and I own together. 24 years this June we'll have been married, and we have 6 kids. So that's kind of Josh Heintzeman in a nutshell, and some of the things I've been working on here in the legislature.
We're going to come back and talk about the legacy issue because that has been the subject of some conversation with our viewers. But I want to start with an issue that's very much been in the forefront. We have had Senator Hoffman and Senator Abler on to discuss it. We've now had a couple of weeks where we haven't had an opportunity to visit about it. So let's pick it up now. And let's go to you, Senator Boldon, and talk about nursing home issues, staffing questions. We have a series of questions from a variety of viewers around our viewing area with concerns about whether or not nursing homes can stay open and how we deal with those staffing problems. Obviously, it's not limited to nursing homes, but let's start with that. Tell our viewers what might be happening on that issue in this legislative session, and then we'll get to the rest of the panel.
Yeah, I appreciate the question and appreciate your viewers raising it. It's important. And I'll just, I shared my background as a registered nurse. And so, my very first job in high school was as a CNA in a long-term care facility. So that was long ago at this point, but that I recognize the challenge of that. That is hard work and it is important work. And making sure that our seniors are cared for is critically important. And there are absolute challenges with that right now. And so I also mentioned I serve on Health and Human Services Committee. And so we have had conversations about this certainly, and the need to, make investments so that those facilities can stay open. And you mentioned staffing is another piece of that as well. And staffing of nursing homes is, there's workforce challenges in many sectors, but staffing of a nursing home is definitely different than staffing of a widget factory, right? Like we're talking about the care of our neighbors and friends and family. And so I experience firsthand staffing issues, in my work in the hospital as well. And so we are absolutely having those conversations and talking about, we're passing a budget. And so part of what we will see in the HHS budget, I'm certain is, making investments to be sure that we can continue that work, to be sure that our seniors can get the care that they need and deserve.
Senator Lucero, nursing home issues, staffing questions, etc.
Well, I don't sit on any of the Health and Human Services committees or related areas, but one of the things that I am aware of is there is the budget targets that were released by the majorities in the House and the Senate and agreed on with the governor are short of what is needed in order to help the long-term care facilities, assisted living facilities, to ensure that our seniors and the aging have the dignity and highest quality of life possible. And one of the things that I've heard through constituents and communications from across the state, as a matter of fact, is the fact that people that are helping our seniors in this area, whether it be in the assisted living or other in their home, is they're not paid enough. And it's very difficult to find those that are willing and able to help our seniors in these roles. And so the fact that the budget targets fall short of what is needed in order to properly fund the levels to give, again, the dignity and quality of life for our seniors is incredibly disturbing.
Representative Heintzeman, your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Barry, for that question. It's absolutely critical that we get this right. And to give viewers a ballpark idea where the House language currently is, for example, the Minnesota Zoo has been in the Environment Bill appropriated almost $30 million. And cumulatively, if you're looking at the funding over base that has been proposed on our side, and that by that I mean over on the House side, we're only seeing just shy of $4 million to get at this very critical issue of staffing. It's not enough. It's been an uphill battle for us on the GOP side of the aisle to try and convince our colleagues that this is something that absolutely has to be addressed. And if there ever was a time to do that, it's right now. We have, depending on how you work the math, there was recently legislation that takes a different look at our current dollars, but without the inflationary language that Democrats recently passed, we have nearly a $19 billion surplus. To only find just short of $3 million for this subject area is just mind-blowing. I have no explanation. It can't be explained. So I'm hoping to see something come that could potentially address this in conference committee. But at the moment, Barry, it doesn't look good.
Representative Heintzeman, let's talk about you're on the Legacy Committee. We have a question from a viewer in Nicollet County. It's not strictly Legacy Committee related, although I do believe there are some implications for it. It's sort of DNR related, but I'm going to link the two and give you a chance to talk about both Legacy Committee and this viewer's question. This viewer from Nicollet County, I think, is reflecting on an article that appeared in the Star Tribune within recent weeks, dealing with the carp problem. And this viewer wants to know, will there be a bubble barrier put on the Mississippi River to deal with the carp problem? And more generally, whether or not will there be DNR or Legacy Committee actions in that area? So let's start with you, Representative Heintzeman, and we'll go through our panel on that issue.
Sure, happy to address that. And I am guessing that the question isn't necessarily specific to the funding that's coming through Legacy for many projects, but there was no bill that I'm aware of or any kind of legislation or proposal from the Lucero or others, for example, that I recall. But there has been in the Environment Committee, and early on in the DNR budget, which of course is the governor's recommendation, I was really happy to see a carp barrier there. It's a $17 million project. And unless you want to be boating in Minnesota and hit by a flying carp, this is absolutely a huge issue here in Minnesota. And at the moment, the current version of the bill, which I have right here, it's quite heavy, almost 400 pages. I haven't yet found a carp barrier, so I'm really, really concerned about that. In case somebody might have caught me in committee, I've been sharing my frustration that it hasn't, for whatever reason, found its way into the environment bill on the House side. But hopefully we'll see something break on that. Glad to have the question brought forward tonight.
Let's talk about the carp bill, and then I want to come back and talk some more about Lucero. Senator Lucero, the carp question. How do you stand on carp, and what should we do about it?
Well, this is another area I have not been a member in my 9 years in the legislature of any committees or the Legacy. So the best I can speak of on this area is I am aware that there are invasive species, whether they be, in this case, fish or other types of animals, or whether it be aquatic invasive species, different types of weed that I do receive emails on. So I can't speak to carp specifically. I don't know what the proposals are. I don't know where the trouble areas are. The fact that we in Minnesota have a phenomenal natural resources across the state, lakes, rivers, etc. We want to make sure to preserve these. We want to make sure they don't get damaged by any of these invasive species, these non-natural, non-native species to Minnesota, to make sure it's protected so that the next generation can indeed enjoy the great outdoors of Minnesota.
Senator Boldon, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I too don't serve on the Environments Committee, nor have I ever. So I have not heard specific proposals around this or have specific knowledge about this issue. But we'll say, again, broadly, we have wonderful natural resources in Minnesota, and I'm fully supportive of protecting those resources and our planet and our environment, and taking steps to be sure that we are protecting that and having it be clean and beautiful and usable for our generations to come. And so addressing invasive species is certainly a piece of that. I unfortunately can't speak to specific provisions in the bill, but if there's follow-up questions, I'm happy to follow up if people are interested.
Let's go back, Representative Heintzeman, just to do a little cleanup here on the Lucero bill. What kinds of topics did the bill cover this year? What were the controversies? And then we'll go to Senator Boldon. I gather there hasn't been any action on the Senate side, or a final floor vote anyway on the Senate side. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But tell us a little bit about the action in the House on the Lucero bill and what it is, so our viewers know.
Sure, I think I can help bring a little bit of clarity to the Lessard-Sams and to the overall subject area in the Legacy Committee. So Lessard-Sams is a piece of the pie, so to speak, if you're in the Legacy Committee. Of course, the Legacy Amendment funds a number of categories, and the Lessard-Sams is part of that cultural heritage, outdoor and cultural heritage side. It also funds clean water and parks and trails and things of that sort. So it's really an important part, and people might remember when the Legacy Amendment was passed, but specifically to any controversy or anything that's been kind of a difference from years past, I would point to a few things. Number one, the Lessard-Sams Council's recommendations are as usual in the bill, and I think really do go towards a lot of the things that most Minnesotans appreciate. There was some questions that came up in terms of the appropriation for some grant programs and how that might be handled. Overall, though, there was controversy coming out of committee, and typically the bill has had bipartisan support coming out, and in this case, it had bipartisan opposition, the legacy bill in general, which contains the Lessard-Sams. And I'll just quickly speak to that. The Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, there was some carve-outs and some direct appropriation language that many of my members on the GOP side found objectionable. And we had to kind of work that out and try to figure out a way of getting some of that resolved. And we did on the House floor. And I really commend Representative Lilly for his leadership in this. As the chair of the Legacy Committee, I proposed an amendment which was taken that got at a issue of groups that might be applying, or individuals specifically, for Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund money. And their leadership could previously to my amendment applied in spite of some challenges as it might relate to sexual harassment and a judgment specifically in the case of one particular group that was funded through that direct appropriation that I mentioned earlier. And so with that amendment added, which I hope is going to be in the final product, I think there's clear sailing for the legacy bill, but we're not at the end yet, Barry, so we'll see what happens.
So it's passed the House and gone to the Senate. Is that where it's at?
Correct.
All right, so that gets me to Senator Boldon. I realize you may not serve on that committee, and you are not necessarily the expert on everything that comes over from the House to the Senate, but if you can maybe enlighten us a little bit about this, that would be great.
Yeah, I will say, I'll just, one of the great things about the legislature is that it's a team sport. And so no one of us can know everything about every issue. And so I don't sit on the legacy committee, and we have not heard it yet on the Senate floor. And so I don't actually have a lot to report. It has passed in the House, as we just heard. We, in the Senate are working on omnibus bills over the next couple of weeks, and so I imagine we will be hearing it soon. But having not heard it yet, I don't necessarily have a whole lot to report yet.
All right, very good. Senator Lucero, your thoughts. Legacy Committee, Senator the Lessard-Sams legislation, et cetera.
I'm in the position of being at the disadvantage of not being a member of the committee. I haven't heard it. I don't know the details. Hasn't been to the Senate floor yet, so I honestly don't have any information at this point.
All right, let's move on to higher education. We have questions from viewers very concerned about the status of higher education. We have had guests on in the preceding weeks who've talked a little bit about enrollment declines in the Minnesota state system and also at the university. University of Minnesota has a very large budget request. And of course, we also have this issue of what to do, if anything, with the university hospital system as a result of the potential, although not yet consummated, merger with the Sanford Health Systems and Fairview. Senator Lucero, let's start with you. Higher education generally, budget issues, priorities. What can you tell us about that?
Sure, absolutely. To college, multiple colleges, university, over 12 years myself. Then I taught college for 7 years prior to getting into the legislature here. So higher education is definitely a passion. Education, whether it be K through 12 or higher education, is certainly a high priority for me. So when it comes to higher education, the thing that we are witnessing now of people and the decline, I don't know what the direct cause, I'm not a member of the higher education now, but what the larger conversation that I've had over the years, and prior, has been the skyrocketing cost, relationship of the cost of education versus the reward. And so there are many types of careers that universities, colleges offer, that degrees that don't have a value or aren't marketable in the real world. And so when students go for these degrees, whether it be a major or a minor, and they're tens of thousands of dollars, and sometimes over $100,000 in debt, and they don't have a degree that's marketable or a skill set that an employer is willing to pay for, that's a concern. There is an awareness that the trades and skilled positions are high paying and in high demand. And many of these roles can be obtained with a simple 2-year degree. And that's where people are gravitating to as the demand for these roles continue to increase, and the high paying salaries that accompany them. Again, I think it's going to be a challenge for many of these universities, colleges that continue to operate in a brick or mortar sense, because there's another factor we've seen with COVID. Being that I'm in IT and that I do technology for a living, we exponentially moved down the curve of being remote and these capabilities of an education is among those. And I think that there is going to be a learning curve that needs to happen in these higher education institutions of offering the courses in a remote capacity rather than the traditional brick and mortar, because brick and mortar is expensive. You have HVAC, you have a depreciation that needs to happen, upkeep, and there is, I think, a challenge that they're going to have to accompany.
Senator Boldon, higher education issues.
Yeah, I appreciate this topic. Education is something that is really important to me. I have a master's degree in nursing education and have experience in that as well. As I talk to young people in my community, what I often hear is concerns about the high cost of higher education and not wanting to take on a massive student loan debt that will they'll take on with them for years, perhaps decades to come. I also will just note, as we talk about decreasing enrollment, in my community, the University of Minnesota Rochester actually has not experienced that. They actually continue to see increasing enrollment. And I think part of the reason for that is they have some creative programs and affordable programs and programs specific to largely healthcare careers. Which there's a huge need for that, and so they're able to get into the field of their choosing, and then get to work and make a good wage. And so, moving forward, I think we have to address the high cost, or we're going to continue to see declining enrollment. There's a bill in the Senate around free tuition, and the details of it have changed already since it has been introduced. And so, but the concept is really around making education more affordable for more folks. The last thing I will say, just as you mentioned, the merger with Stanford in the HHS committee several weeks ago, we had an excellent hearing about this, and it was a packed room, and we actually had several former governors come to testify. It was extremely informative and brought up, I think, for probably nearly all of us on the committee, some really significant concerns about what is happening with that. And there will be continued conversations about really what can be and should be done with that.
Yeah, I think that hearing is famous for the only recent opportunity that former Governor Dayton and former Governor Pawlenty spoke at that same hearing. It doesn't happen every day. So Representative Heintzeman, higher education issues, also the merger question, Stanford, University of Minnesota, and the academic health center piece of that. Your thoughts on all of that?
It's a large subject area, and I'll try to cover some of the ground that maybe hasn't yet been discussed. Affordability is such an important piece of higher education, and with 6 kids ranging in age from 21 all the way down to 6, this is a topic of discussion, no question, at my house. And all 3 of my older children have really appreciated the PSEO program. For those that might not be familiar, that's your post-secondary enrollment option. And here's a news flash: if you're going to work on a family level, work on affordability, your junior and senior year, your students are eligible to attend a Minnesota State campus at no charge, rather than those K through 12 dollars. Following the student into the high school program, they can follow a student over to a Minnesota State campus. And it's just been absolutely huge. And the other part of that that's interesting is not only can they apply those dollars towards a Minnesota State campus, they can also apply them towards other institutions. And that's something that I want to mention specifically because we have had the higher ed bill moving along and was heard yesterday. And there was unfortunately language that prohibited those dollars from following kids into an institution that had a statement of faith, Barry. So if that's ringing any kind of question marks in people's minds in terms of a constitutional question, you're on the right track, because I guarantee you if that legislation moves through our current process and becomes law in Minnesota, that will be challenged. Absolutely convinced of that. You can't exclude an institution simply because it has a statement of faith. And think about this, Barry. If for example, you have a student that walks onto a campus that may be one of those institutions, and they never take a class that even touches faith, yet simply because the institution has a statement, they're now excluded from receiving dollars. That's shocking to me. So that's a concerning area. On the positive, Representative Pawlenty, who is a chair of the Higher Ed Committee in the House, has done, I think, a really good job of getting at some of the needs in the Minnesota State program, and then also addressing some issues at the University of Minnesota in terms of funding. And we do have a surplus, so now might be an opportunity to do that. We'll see if the language comes through in conference committee from those conversations after the fact. But that's kind of where things currently lay in terms of funding and some of the pros and cons as I see it.
Representative Heintzeman, I'm wondering if you've seen. Go ahead, Senator Boldon. Yes, you go ahead first. And
sorry, I just wanted to chime in on the. I appreciate it. I just wanted to chime in on the PSEO piece to just clarify the language, at least on the Senate side, around that says that PSEO dollars cannot be used. Students can still attend entities that are, religious schools. It just says that those schools cannot use a statement of faith as part of the admission process. So what it keeps from happening is discrimination actually against folks who who may not share the faith, don't have can't agree, can't attest to that faith statement. An example of some of those questions are, tell us about your relationship with Jesus Christ. Well, a student who is Jewish or Muslim, is not going to have an answer to that question, and that cannot be used as a reason to not accept them into that school. So it really is just a mechanism to not allow discrimination for those students, and they still can go to those schools. There just can't be a sort of a barrier for acceptance as part of the acceptance process. I just want to clarify.
Representative Heintzeman, I want to go back to you just very briefly. Senator Boldon touched on the U Academic Center business. We had a lot of press coverage a month ago. Two former governors testifying we need to do something about it. Disputes about whether it's $1 billion or $500 million. Has there been any progress on that from a legislative standpoint? Any news on that we can tell our viewers?
Thank you for the chance to respond, Barry. And on that specifically, I don't have anything to report beyond what has already been mentioned. And you might have covered a few of the high-level headlines in terms of those attending in some of the conversations. I would mention though that when we're getting back to this PSEO discussion, that there's plenty of things that students of faith may find objectionable in a secular institution, but we don't exclude them from being able to actually participate and attend simply because there's something there that might be offensive to them as one faith or another. We allow people to have an open discussion and dialogue about these kinds of things. And rather than excluding an institution, I think that it's better to let everyone kind of figure out where they lay on these issues and make decisions for themselves.
So one of the topics that we were discussing at some length a few weeks ago when we were regularly having this program before floor sessions and other things intervened was the progress on the marijuana bill and whether or not there'd be further action on this. There's been some press coverage that suggests, and I think at least one member of the legislature has suggested maybe this is an issue that'll be taken up next year. Let's start with you, Senator Lucero. I don't think we've picked on you to begin here for a while. What's happening on the marijuana legislation? If anything, what would you like to see happen? Give our viewers an update.
Well, thank you, Barry, for that. So far, we're batting zero because I have not been on any of the committees. The marijuana legislation has not come to the Housing Committee, K-12 Education Committee, or the Energy Committee. So I've not seen that legislation yet. Anyway.
Well, we're coming to K-12 next, so we'll pick on you there. So we'll give you the opportunity to say something. But anyway, to go on about the marijuana then.
Yeah, totally appreciate it. Generally speaking, what I can say is there are certainly people on both sides of this issue. Very good people, very genuine, honest people. I personally, myself, do not support recreational marijuana. What I do support is medical marijuana because it's clear that there are properties that THC or other parts of the plant. I'm not a marijuana expert at all at any capacity, but it's my understanding there are very valuable benefits that can help in a health capacity. So in that aspect, I'm very much in favor because government should not get in the way and should not limit people from access to anything that would help them in pain or any other remedies that might exist. In terms of recreation, though, that's where concern I do not support. When we look at those from across the country that have legalized this, whether we hear from the voices of law enforcement, the voices of employers, and other voices, there are high concerns and the struggles that come along with legalizing recreational marijuana is among those that I do not support.
Senator Boldon, the recreational marijuana bills, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I suspect that this is something we will get done this year. I anticipate that will be the case. The bill, my understanding, I haven't seen the bill in a while. It did come through HHS, but I think this may be the bill that holds the record for the most number of committee stops because it goes through pretty much almost every committee, not quite, but almost. And so it's been some time and it has undergone many changes. There have been many amendments and changes to it over the course of time, which is good. I mean, that's the committee process, right? To take to take feedback and adapt it. So my understanding is I believe it's nearing the end of its committee path. And so I do anticipate we will hear it on the floor. Broadly speaking, I am supportive of personal use cannabis. We have a system right now that is not working. And so I support, people are using personal use cannabis today, right now. We have an illicit market. And so, in my view, putting some regulations around that. And, right now people are purchasing and they don't know what's in it. They don't know a concentration. And so having some regulations around that makes it a safer system. And so for that reason, and as well as, there's a long history of racial injustice with, enforcement of the policy around cannabis. So for a number of reasons, I am in favor of it and do think it's something we will get done this year.
Representative Heintzeman, your thoughts on the recreational marijuana bills and the likelihood of action in this session?
I think that the likelihood of action is it's high, but at the same time, even though it's a 300-page bill in the House, which is just an amazing amount of regulation, there's significant problems. I would fully agree with my colleague Senator Lucero in terms of the guardrails that need to be there for those that have a medical need. I think that is a separate issue, though, from what we're looking at in recreational use. And the impacts are trifold. Think about what this means for businesses who have, for example, heavy equipment and what it might mean for them to try to keep their employees and the public safe, highway equipment for one. The job that we're complicating in law enforcement and keeping our roads safe, there is no breathalyzer to look for THC on a roadside sobriety test is your only option, where you're having to go through all of the steps of confirming if somebody's impaired or not. That's difficult. That's going to be a real challenge. And then, just our track record, be the third leg of this isn't good. I mean, last session, all of a sudden we have THC-laced gummies that were just showing up. And very little debate, conversation. Maybe it was an accident. I don't know. I mean, there's just not been, I think, the kind of attention to this issue and the potential impacts, both negative and positive, in the way that I think it should. And I don't think that this is something that should move forward. And quite honestly, I got to ask why. I mean, my friends on the other side of the aisle are regulating things like flavored vape products and looking at the potential danger to our kids and to the public on products like that, but then completely, in my opinion, ignoring the huge problems that recreational marijuana would create in the state of Minnesota. I just think this is the wrong direction and a terrible policy for our state.
More to come, as they say. Senator Lucero, let's go back to you. I promised you we'd come back to K-12 education. That's an important topic to our viewers. People are concerned about a variety of issues, the amount of budget or the budgeting for K-12 education, some questions about micromanaging education in schools and other kinds of issues. The last time I checked, I believe in the biennial budget, somewhere between 45 and 50% of the budget is K-12 education, if I'm recalling that correctly. And if I'm not, correct me. Tell our viewers a little bit about what the status of that bill is, and your thoughts about how it's developing and where it might go. And we'll go to Senator Boldon then, and then to Representative Heintzeman. So, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. So one of you're spot on in terms of the percentage of the budget. So K through 12 education and the Health and Human Services are the two largest appropriations in all of state government funding. And in terms of K through 12, that is certainly warranted because it's important. It's important to teach the next generation the skills and the academic opportunities in order to set them up a successful life. But unfortunately, that's not what's happening this session with the bill that came out. So early on, in the first week or two, among the different stakeholders within the K through 12 education area was Minnesota. And they, with the budget surplus, around 17 and a half, or 19 billion, depending on how you look at that, they said, we want to fully fund education. So I asked the question, well, what exactly fully fund mean? Please give me a number so I can understand. And they said $8 to $9 billion on top of last year's. So budget, not last year, last biennium. And so $8 to $9, in their opinion, is fully funding education. Well, I believe the number now is a little over $2 billion of what's being added. And so that's not fully funding education per their standards. But the priorities that are in the bill are not empowering boards. One of the things that I have been advocating the entire time in office is returning the word independent in independent school districts, because our system was set up that way, because we recognize different areas of the state, different needs, and have different ways to be able to maximize educational opportunities for local students. Unfortunately, this legislature and majority continued on the path of usurping control, putting in mandates, some of them unfunded, that are not going to be beneficial. I happen to serve an area, St. Michael, Albertville, STMA school district, that is the bottom of their funding, and they have been at the bottom my entire time in office. And that is denying students educational opportunities area, but also across the board, habitual bottom. And that's where we need to not continue down throwing money at problems and areas, and instead empowering our local boards so they can tailor the decisions that are best for us.
Senator Boldon, K-12 education, your thoughts?
Yeah, appreciate having the chance to talk about this topic. So I don't sit on the Education Finance Committee. I do sit on Education Policy, but broadly speaking, as we are thinking about an education bill, it is important that we
Do you want to tell our viewers what that means when you say you're on education policy, but it's not education? People who watch this program regularly go, they speak legislative ease. They know what that means, but your ordinary viewer may wonder, what is she talking about? So tell our viewers what that means.
Absolutely. Thank you for that prompt. I appreciate that. So as we sort of label our committees and divide up the work, sometimes we will divide up the finance from the policy. So essentially, the finance committee is the one that handles the budget, the dollars connected to education, which I don't sit on. I sit on the policy committee, which is the policy. It's the bills that essentially don't have funding attached to them, don't have money attached to them. And so that's the difference. Some committees are combined and some are separate. So
anyway, go ahead. I interrupted you in full throat there on the K-12 education. So you still have the floor. Go ahead and tell us.
No, that's a great question. Yeah, thank you for that.
Yes.
Broadly speaking, in terms of education funding, it is important and appropriate that it is a significant portion of our budget. As a state, we have a responsibility to provide public education. It is the right thing to do. It is a public good. We all do better when the next generation is well educated. And so it is necessary that, another thing I'll note is that there's challenges now because we have not invested as we should have for many, many years. And so there's a hole there that we need to dig out of. That, quite frankly, we're not going to, be able to fill that hole just in this biennium. There will be work into the future as well. But we are able to make significant changes this year with the dollars that we have. I'll note just in terms of the budget for this, and, it relates to our earlier conversation about nursing homes as well. A lot of the dollars, most of the dollars we have right now is one-time money, not ongoing money. And so, again, if you're not in the legislature, you might not be thinking of things that way, but there is a difference there in terms of, we have this money to spend this one time versus making changes that will go into the future and having those funds into the future. And so there are a lot of ways we can spend one-time money that are important and valuable and right. And there is still work to be done into the future.
All right, very good. Thank you, Senator Boldon. Representative Heintzeman, K-12 education.
Yeah, we actually just had this bill in the Ways and Means Committee this morning. So, I was actually quite shocked not serving on that committee to hear some of what I was hearing from some of my colleagues again here on the underside of the aisle, because I have been hearing from my school districts. And my school districts, typically when the education bill comes, they know I'm a pretty conservative guy, and they're going to say, hey, Heintzeman, there's some things we like, some things we don't like, but we really could use your support on this. They're not saying that. This bill is super heavy on requirements for our school districts from St. Paul, as opposed to the operating dollars that they need to have and the flexibility that they need to have to provide the type of quality education that our school districts are looking to continue to provide. And that's something that's really frustrating, that we're seeing so many strings attached to these dollars, that my school districts and the school boards are scared of what this bill might mean for them in terms of all of these requirements, as I just mentioned.
I've heard that this issue has popped up on previous programs and in previous years, and I'm just wondering if you can give us some examples of what you're hearing from school districts that might be a concern about this issue.
Well, we counted, Barry, so I'm happy to get into some specifics there. 65 new mandates are in the House bill that my school districts are concerned about. Things that get at a lot of the what has typically been described as local control, things that my school boards would have been able to do in terms of how they would use funding dollars. The formula increase here is 4 on the front side and 2 on the back side, which I think that there's some support there. But when it comes to the additional issues, even student disciplinary processes are being changed. Licensure rules are being changed. Curriculum mandates that just go on and on and on. And it's really concerning to my school boards and to my parents, quite honestly, as they're trying to figure out, what is the future going to look like going forward post-COVID, and some of the challenges that we faced the last 2 years in learning because of so many kids getting behind. E-learning did not work for our K-12 system, and we really need to be on top of this going forward. If we're not, our kids are going to stay behind. And these mandates that are unfortunately in the House language, which I should mention is 40% of Minnesota's budget is education, these mandates are not going to get at those problems and empower our teachers to make decisions in their classrooms for our kids that are best for our communities. That flexibility has to be there, and I hope the final product includes it, because at the moment it doesn't.
So, Barry, if I
Senator
could add one.
Okay, go ahead. Yes, Senator Lucero, go right ahead.
Sure, I appreciate it. So one of the things I would add is parents are responding in a manner of removing their children from government schools, from public education. We are seeing record increase in homeschooling and private schools, as parents are not happy with mandates that are coming down from state government that are using local control boards and others that are usurping parental responsibility and control over their children's education. And so these mandates, again, are divisive. They're not helpful. It's more of an indoctrination style, is how I've heard it described from some of the patients I continue to receive. And it's just not really beneficial in any capacity for our children who are going to be competing with peers in a global competitive workforce who are not learning this same type of divisive, unnecessary content. And whereas Minnesota continues to fall further and further in math and types of testing scores, that's where our focus should be, is setting up our children, empowering them with skills and knowledge able to compete against, again, their peers in other countries that are focused on math, engineering, and other areas, rather than these states, again, that are not helpful whatsoever.
Senator Boldon, I'm going to give you an opportunity. We kind of went around the table a second time. Any further thoughts on K-12 education?
Well, I mean, again, I would just sort of reiterate, take it back to, the focus on students and the focus. I have met with over the last few weeks many teachers who, share the challenges around, especially around wages. Again, we talk about earning a living wage. And so that's, part of the investment into this space is to be making sure that teachers we're able to continue to recruit and retain teachers into this space. Other funding going into, closing the special education cross subsidy and the English language learning cross subsidy. We're at a place where we have not invested the dollars that we needed to over a very, very long time. And so working to catch up to that, to be sure the schools have the resources that they need is important and necessary work.
All right. Well, we have a question from a viewer about the status of the bonding bill. There was some talk early in the session about a bonding bill, and perhaps there wasn't going to be a bonding bill. Let's start with you, Representative Heintzeman. Bonding bill this session, and what do you hear about what it's going to look like?
So the bonding bill came through the House very early in session, and quite honestly, my hat is off to my GOP colleagues in the Senate who said, well, we're going to tap the brakes because we know that as we were coming through an election cycle, one of the biggest things we heard was that we really need to be focused on making sure there's tax cuts there, and specifically for our seniors. And when that moves forward, the bonding bill would move forward. And I think that that's forthcoming. I think that rather than alligator tears being described by the governor on that issue, I think we're going to see something move sooner than later because it's really important, these infrastructure projects as well as tax cuts. And I'm glad that conversation is happening now. It didn't seem as though it was really being taken seriously in spite of the many promises from the governor throughout that campaign cycle, but it does seem to have some renewed interest there. And I think once we see those tax cuts and that exemption for Social Security benefits, I believe that the bonding bill will be back into discussion front and center again. At the moment, we are waiting.
Let's go to the Senate and see what the Senate thinks on the bonding bill. Senator Boldon, let's start with you.
Yeah, I appreciate this question. So we too had a bonding bill come to the Senate floor, and as just a refresher, a note that a bonding bill can't be passed by a simple majority. It requires a supermajority because it is borrowing money. And so in the Senate, what that looks like is that it requires both parties to vote for it. It can't be just a party line vote. And so that it did not pass. And which I think is really unfortunate. It was a solid bill. It was a bill that was largely negotiated last year. It really is projects largely from last year. And it was a balanced bill. And it was pretty close to 50-50 Republican projects and Democrat projects, Metro projects and outstate Minnesota projects. It was a good bill, and a bill with shovel-ready projects that have been waiting since last year, projects that include, in parts of our state, they have been drinking bottled water for a year and a half. They do not have drinkable water. Really important projects that are waiting for us to pass this bill to get them started, and it failed, and it's unfortunate that to hold projects hostage. To talk about a separate topic, I think is unfortunate. And just in regards to taxes, that we'll get a tax bill that has been working its way through the committee process, and I imagine we will see those bills finalized soon. That work is ongoing. We have to do more than one thing at the same time.
Senator Lucero, we have about a minute left. You get the last word. Tell us your view on the bonding bill as our wrap-up comment from our legislative panel this evening.
Thank you, Barry. And again, as I've been receiving some feedback here that my bandwidth hasn't been the best. So I look forward to the next time the program is in person. Again, I apologize for the network problems I'm suffering here. But the reality is Minnesotans are over. We have a $19 billion budget surplus. Republicans recognize this. Unfortunately, in times of a surplus, Democrats are demanding taxes. And so that is the reason why Republicans are standing strong and saying, hey, we need, before we put the state of Minnesota in further debt, before we spend billions of more dollars, we recognize that those on fixed income, Minnesotans across the state are hurting, need a tax cut, and Republicans are going to continue to stand strong in support of Minnesotans and demand a Social Security across the board cut to bring tax relief in, again, a time of surplus before we spend more money and put Minnesota into debt.
All right. With that concluding thought, I want to thank our distinguished panel of guests this evening for joining us. I want to remind you, the viewer, that we'll be back next week and all the weeks that follow until the legislature goes home. And I also want to remind you that every evening on the Minnesota channel, you can see legislative coverage on your public broadcasting system channel throughout the state of Minnesota. Tune in for that extra coverage. We look forward to seeing you next week and every week that follows. Thank you and good night.
Your Legislators is made possible by Minnesota Corn. From developing best practices that help farmers better protect our natural resources to the latest innovations in value-added products, Minnesota corn farmers are proud to invest in third-party research leading to a more sustainable future for our local communities. Minnesota Farmers Union, standing for agriculture, working for farmers. On the web at mfu.org.